You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Greetings, everyone. Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily, episode 1554, brought to you today by U.S. Rider. This time, Horse Radio Network founder Glenn sits down with Shawna Karrasch, author of the book You Can Teach Your Horse to Do Anything, to clear up all the confusion about what positive and negative reinforcement really are.
Even under the best circumstances, travel is stressful for horses. We've all been there, stuck on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. You can make the journey knowing that U.S. Rider is there for you. Get peace of mind on the road with U.S. Rider's nationwide 24/7 roadside assistance coverage for both you and your horse. Join today at usrider.org.
Well, hi, Shawna, and welcome to Horse Tip Daily. It's good to have you on.
Oh, thank you. It is so nice to be here.
Okay, so how are we going to help people today?
Well, I have kind of a number of things. Some of my behavior tips are actually more behavior tips than it's training tips, things to keep in mind. And so the first one I kind of wanted to talk about today is it's about positive and negative reinforcement and what those two actually are, because I find there's a lot of unknown or misconceptions about what those two things actually are. So I kind of thought I'd talk about that because I think the more people know, the better they're going to be when they interact with their horse and to keep things in mind. So that's kind of where I want to start today.
All right, let's do that one today.
Okay, perfect. So today so let's first talk about positive reinforcement. And I want to tell everybody, too, the training tips or the training principles that I use as part of positive reinforcement or the on-target training, which is my business, they're proven principles. These aren't theories. These are proven principles, and there's volumes and textbooks written about it. But the hard part is it is in such muddled terms, because it's just so technical that it's hard to put into everyday practical application. So that's what I have focused on, is breaking it down and having it be so it's layman friendly, so everybody can understand.
So even I can get it? If a horse husband can get it, then anybody can get it.
Exactly. And I've even had husbands that were not horse people read my book, and I've heard stories of saying he wouldn't put it down. So apparently it does apply and is interesting to the non-horse person as well.
My wife has also proved that you can train a husband through positive reinforcement, especially with food. We can be trained.
And that's awesome. I love to see her taking those principles.
I took her clicker away.
Doesn't come with that. That's funny. But okay, so positive reinforcement positive reinforcement is putting something into the equation. And I think this is important to keep in mind that positive and negative reinforcement were written by scientists. So the positive reinforcement, it means something's added to the equation, which has a reinforcing value, and negative reinforcement means something is taken out of the equation, which has a reinforcing value. So it doesn't mean good and bad, like we tend to think that nowadays. But so by adding positive reinforcement in, and I use food a lot because that's what we use with marine mammals, and it's something that they need to survive. And because they need it to survive, its power as a motivator is unrivaled by anything we currently have in our training system. So the best thing we got going through traditional training, food is stronger than that because they are born looking for food. They need food, air, water, and they need to procreate to maintain themselves as a species. So those four things are what is in them. Obviously, the procreation comes later with hormones. But and I'm not going there.
No, I don't think we should go there. We don't need to.
Yeah, food, air, and water are the things they need to survive. So because of that, what does a baby horse do? Within an hour, it's up and it's eating and drinking, basically. Right. And nobody had to teach it that. So the trick is, how do you use positive reinforcement to turn it into a working behavior, and that's really important. So, but it's also very, very important. So positive reinforcement means something's added to the equation, which has a reinforcing value, and not our perception of reinforcement, but the horse's perception. And that, I think a lot of people get muddled there. We think because we feel good about it, a pat on the neck is great, but it's not going to really push them to another level, like, free jumping. I haven't seen one horse jump, a 3-6 jump on their own with no chute, no lunge line, just a jump in the middle of a big arena for a pat on the neck. But I have seen them do it over and over with food reinforcement to make that choice. So that's what we have with positive reinforcement. And there's other things that you can use as you get to know your horse. They won't be as strong as the primary reinforcement. And then on the other side of that coin is negative reinforcement. Now, this is where everybody thinks it's punishment, and it's not punishment. Negative reinforcement means something is taken out of the equation, which increases that behavior. So you think about traditional horse training, it is all negative reinforcement. For example, because people get really defensive about this, but you think about it, like we get on our horses. Well, what is the first thing we do? We teach them about a halter and a lead rope. And when we're walking with our horse on a halter and lead rope, if the horse kind of veers over to the side to look at something, we apply pressure on that lead rope. When he's good again, we soften, we release that pressure, we remove it. And that's the negative. It's the removal of the aversive, the pulling on the lead rope. And the same thing if you think about a bit. When we put a bit in reins and we're riding our horses, when we want them to slow down, we pull on the bit via the reins. And that applies pressure. When they're good, we soften. We remove that pressure. What they're working for is the removal of that pressure. Again, that's negative reinforcement because something's taken out of the equation, which is the pressure. And then the other thing I think of is our legs. We ride with our legs. We want them to go forward. We squeeze with our legs. When we go forward, we soften. We remove that pressure. So those are all tools of removal reinforcement. I changed when I do clinics. I don't use the term negative reinforcement.
I was going to say, because that's completely different than what I would think of as negative reinforcement.
Exactly, and that's the problem. And I'm going from a textbook. This is how it was written: positive and negative were added and taken away, not positive.
I mean, it makes sense after you explain it.
Yeah. And so that's like in clinics. I can be 2 hours into a clinic and somebody's gone, "Oh no, I don't use negative reinforcement." So I kind of change the terms because it just gets people's dander up, So I use the term reward and removal reinforcement because I think it generates a better picture in our head.
Yeah, it makes more sense for me mentally, and I think negative is just a bad word. It automatically puts people on the defensive. So
right, and
yeah.
it's not. And it wasn't written as a bad word, but as we've come to think of it, we think it means punishment, and it does not mean punishment. Punishment is a different thing, actually. Now, the tricky part is some people can use the negative removal reinforcement too sharply, and then we can move into the point of punishment. But negative reinforcement, the horse actually has control over. As long as they do something, we do something. So it's not a bad term. So it is what traditional horse training is about. And I do use the removal reinforcement. We'll use that term since it kind of sits well with people. And I ride with my legs, I ride with my feet, I ride with my hands. I use all the tools. But what I've just done is put the positive or the reward reinforcement, mixed it together with the removal reinforcement. So you have the best of both worlds. And you look at what we've done through traditional horse training, again, being the removal reinforcement, we have gotten so far. So when I came into horses originally, I thought, well, I'm not out to change what's going on, to take away what's going on. I wanted to just add in what I saw not being used with horses. I didn't see, there was no, let's, reinforce him for the good behavior by adding something in. There was no reward reinforcement being offered. So that's where I come along. So that's reward removal reinforcement. And there's one more little tip in here that I consider it the granddaddy of all tips. And this is just something to keep in mind as you're working with your horse. And this is if any behavior increases in frequency, something in the environment is reinforcing it. I mean, and that's just your basic principles of operant conditioning, which is learning. It's how we all think and process. That's the reason we do things or don't do things, is because of our reinforcement history associated with something. So a horse that won't get in the trailer thinks, I do not like the trailer. I don't want to get in the trailer, for whatever reason. And they have found that oftentimes if they avoid, they pull back, they don't go in, all the things that horses do when they're not loading in the trailer, whether it's kicking or rearing, that they can, at least for that moment in time, avoid getting in the trailer. So if any behavior increases in frequency, whether it's, an unwanted behavior like bucking or or, kicking or not loading in a trailer or raising their head up when you bring the clippers around, it's because something in the environment has reinforced it, whether it's by getting something they want or avoiding something they don't want. And then conversely, a horse who readily loads in the trailer has had good things happen in the trailer, or at the very least, nothing bad happen in the trailer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So everything that they do. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. So if you see any behavior, if your horse starts getting worse about going to the paddock and they start pulling and getting too excited, something is happening. So I just try to think of it as scales. I look at it as scales that are out of balance. And I just try and put more reinforcement on the side of the behavior I want. And pretty soon, you're going to see the behavior you want and less of the behavior you don't want. But trying to identify and see if you can't figure out what is increasing that behavior, if it's an unwanted behavior, or even if it's a good one, because then you might want to just keep adding to it and go, something's working here, so I'm on the right track. So I think that's really important to keep in mind as we train our horses, because it helps us come to a place of at least recognizing that something we're doing, unbeknownst to ourselves sometimes, might be reinforcing them. Another example that I just got the gift of gab, don't I, Glenn?
That's why it's easy for me. I love guests like you because then I don't have to do much. You make my job so much easier.
Good. I'm glad. Another example, I think that's a really good one of behavior increasing in frequency with us unintentionally reinforcing something is pawing. A lot of times what people do, if a horse starts pawing in the cross ties, they come running up and correct the horse, to give them a stern, reprimand or warning or something. But a lot of times when a horse is left alone in cross ties, they get anxious and they want you to come to them. So sometimes just us coming back, even if we're coming to reprimand them or correct them, it can still be more reinforcing than what we think is correction. So if you see a behavior, any behavior increase frequency, even though you may perceive what you're doing as not reinforcing, your horse may. So just to break it down and think like that, I think can help in a lot of situations to identify maybe what might be going on, because it's going on all the time, whether you're aware of it or not. So the more you become aware of it, the better you can be as a trainer, and the more apt you can identify and target behavior you want to change.
Shawna has tons of resources for equestrians on her Facebook page, Shawna Karrasch Equine, and on her website, shawnakarrasch.com. Well, there you have it. Horse Radio Network has thousands of engaging podcasts for horse people, and you can have them sent right to your phone. Just subscribe via your favorite podcast player. This is Coach Jen, and I will be back again soon with another tip. Until then, go ride your horse. The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements made by guests on the Horse Tip Daily. Please use your own judgment when listening to the tips on this show.